What is the number one character trait you should search for in a public servant? Let me ask that another way. When you're going to the polling place and there are dozens of choices, how do you decide? If you're a person of faith, or more specifically a follower of Jesus, what characteristics should rise to the top of all others when you're making a decision on who should lead? Well, today's very special guest is someone who rose to the top of his state, Tennessee, as its governor. When he ran for his second term, he was reelected by the largest margin in state history. That says something, doesn't it? He's written a book about his time as government, but through the lens of a follower of Christ, someone who doesn't find his purpose or identity in the margin of victory, but faithfulness to the mission. Don't go away. This is a conversation you will not want to miss. Stay with us. Governor Bill Haslam is former two-term governor of Tennessee, and before that, a city mayor. He led his state on some of the most contentious, even controversial issues, but even at the center of power, never forgot that his identity and his witness would be shaped by how he responded in moments of challenge. Bill Haslam is, before anything else, a follower of Jesus, and that means that the way he loves his neighbors, the way he treats the people or the person in front of him is the way he'll be judged. Not the number of bills he signed into law or the miles of roads he paved, but the way he loved. But how does that inform the way you, as a leader, view abortion or capital punishment or healthcare reform? Does it even matter if church and state are two different worlds? Should one even affect the other? How can a Christian leader bring unity and reconciliation when the issues being debated in the public square are questions of ethics and morality? Don't you need to be aggressive sometimes when you're fighting evil? Do you always need to act and sound like a Christian? Or is it okay to adopt a political persona when you're doing battle? These questions and many more are answered in a new book that Governor Bill Haslam has written, Faithful Presence, the promise and the peril of faith in the public square. Joining me from his home in Knoxville, Tennessee, Governor Bill Haslam. Welcome to State of Independence.
Well, thanks, Joe. It's fun to see you again, and I've been looking forward to being on the show.
We're just so delighted to have you, Governor. I know you're busy, and we're just so excited to have you on the show. So did you aspire as a young person to be a mayor one day, or then a governor?
I really didn't. I'd always cared about and been involved in politics, but mostly helping other people run. But then an opportunity came up. I'd been in business for 20 plus years. An opportunity came up to run for mayor of Knoxville, my hometown. And I first laughed and you've got the wrong guy when folks asked me about it. But over time, began to pray and think about it. Those close to me encouraged me to do it and ran and barely won. I won my first race, 51% to 49%. But loved it, loved being mayor. Found it a really just extraordinary place to serve and kind of found my calling in that, if you will. Ran again for re-election, and then 4 years after that ran for governor of Tennessee. And it's the opportunity to serve your own home state is, I don't know that there's a better job than being governor of your home state. So loved having the chance to do it.
Yeah, well, you have such a good heart and the servant's heart, the right heart, and it's clear that the people loved you back. That's kind of a nice thing, right?
Some of them. I should be clear about that. I can give you some emails that weren't so friendly.
So now, what sets you apart is the fact that you're a believer in Jesus. When did that happen? Were you somebody raised in a Christian home and just kind of always followed the Lord, or is there a story?
No, my story starts, I'm a junior in high school, and organization called Young Life, that a lot of your listeners might be familiar with, came to my high school and was invited to go to a weekend camp and really kind of first heard the gospel clearly for the first time. And I don't remember who the speaker was, but I remember him saying, what Jesus claims is too important not to decide about. So you can either decide he's who he said he was, or he's not, but don't not decide. And I decided that the best I could, that I would begin to follow Jesus with my life, standing on the steps of a gymnasium in the middle of Western North Carolina. My story kind of, the next part of it is 3 weeks later, I come home, or I'm at school and get a call and go home and find out that my mother, who's an incredibly young 42-year-old, laid down to take a nap and never woke up and died of a heart attack. And so those two events became two of the most formative shaping events for the rest of my life that happened back in the fall of 1974.
Wow, so incredible that happened. Your mother's passing. You feel that strengthened your faith and your walk with Christ?
I think it really did. When you're a 16-year-old boy, you kind of think you're bulletproof, and you think, the world's all about, your football game that Friday night, or who you're going to take to the prom, or whatever it is. And then I think an event like that is, for some people, maybe it pushes them in the wrong direction. For me, it was it shook me out of this self-absorbed world that most 16-year-olds are in, to think about the bigger questions of what we're doing and what we're going to use our lives for, and then what's ultimately true and what's not. And for me, those two events back to back like that shaped my life.
Yeah. Well, clearly they had a huge impact on you, and it's amazing where God has taken you. Yeah, I'm sure when you first asked Jesus into your heart as a young guy, you probably had no idea that it was going to lead to someday serving in the public square. I mean, as mayor and then as governor of your state.
No, I certainly didn't. And I also say this, I probably, without that, I don't know that I would have run. I don't know that I would have had this idea of calling and looking for the way where you can serve in your most effective way. And so for me, the events of that fall, I think, led to running for office, all those years later, and approaching it, I hope, with a different frame of mind than I would have if I hadn't have ever heard the gospel and decided to follow Jesus back in almost 40 years before.
Yeah, I was so happy to spend time around you back in October of last year at that Christian conference, and I just, what I really loved about you was the fact that there's no edge to you. A lot of people in politics are very ambitious, very edgy people, and they carry it with them. So it's almost like baggage they carry with them. Yeah, not necessarily bad baggage, but it comes with them. This edginess, especially given the fact that we live in such a contentious political society right now. I mean, where people are pretty hard-nosed about what they believe and hard-edged and not very liking at all of the other side, whatever the other side is. Doesn't seem to be a lot of tolerance for loving people who don't see it the way I see it for lots of Americans. And so tell me how you deal with that. What's your sense of that?
Unfortunately, we've come to a point in this country where if somebody disagrees with you, they've become the bad guy. And then the object is to win the argument. Which is, if you think about it, is totally backwards, right? The object should be to get to the best answer. And if you're on the other side, that doesn't make you the bad guy. That doesn't make you the enemy. The enemy are the problems we're facing. The enemies are, making certain that folks can have a great job. The enemy is trying to solve the difficult problems that we keep kicking the can down the road on, whether it be immigration or climate issues, or a budget that's out of control, and we're going to be, our great grandchildren are going to be paying the interest on the debt that we're taking on. Those are the hard issues. And so, unfortunately, we've got, like I said, a world where not only are you as the person on the other side the bad guy, and the object is to win the argument. It's become a world in which the most clever put down and the most entertaining presentation becomes the one that wins, which is, again, it's crazy if you think about it. We have serious problems. I mean, you're looking at the things look at what we've dealt with just in the last little bit. A war in Ukraine that, I think is shaken all of us to a point of reality. Inflation that is challenging all of our lives in different ways. A real worldwide pandemic in COVID that we couldn't just act like wasn't going to happen. Those are three really big challenges, right? And the object shouldn't be to see who can have the most clever put down on social media. It should be, we live in a world with real problems. What are we going to do to try to solve those?
Yeah, yeah. That's the right idea and the right attitude, Governor. When you were mayor and governor, I'm willing to bet you probably had some really tough issues to deal with. No dearth of challenges as a mayor or as a governor of an important state. Can you think to yourself of a situation that you had to deal with that was really hard, but that God allowed it, used you, and used the situation to be able to bring people together and to arrive at a good conclusion, and people end up being really grateful for it?
I can think of several like that, and then some where you have to make hard calls and you don't get everybody on the same page. That's part of the reality of the world we live in. But I think here's where I think, and particularly for people of faith, here's where we've gone wrong. And I'll go back to your specific example. All of us are frustrated and exhausted about the state of the political world today. Like if I go speak a lot of places, and I always say, raise your hand if you're frustrated and exhausted by the politics today. It's 100% success ratio. Everybody raises their hand. Like I'm tired of this. And one of the things I've tried to say is, the people, particularly to people of faith, like we're part of the problem. Unfortunately, one of the things I discovered in office was that people of faith didn't act any different. Christians didn't act any different than non-believers. And if there's anything that's clear from Scripture, if you look at the Sermon on the Mount, the subtext of the whole thing is be different. The salt's supposed to be different than the meat. The light is supposed to be different than the dark. And unfortunately, that's not my experience. And people of faith's reaction has been, well, the stakes are so big here. What we're battling over matters so much that you can't bring a pillow to a knife fight. We have to win this battle. But I would argue this, that there's, for too many of us, we've lost our first love, if you will. And we've gotten to the point where we've totally forgotten that what God loves are people who are humble. It says, for God exalts the humble and lowers the prideful. And he wants people who are on mission, who are saying, here's a sense of what God is up to in the world, and it's going to be about improving and changing the lives of the people that I can impact. And we've somehow lost that in this sense of we're in this battle, and it's good versus evil, and my side's good and the other side's evil.
Right. Well, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, I think the challenge for most Christian people is how do we behave as Christians in the public square? What is it that sets us apart? Should we be set apart? Or are we to do battle as everybody else? Are we to act like everybody else acts? But just carry with us the title or the title of Christian. And I think you hit the nail on the head here. At the end of the day, we can't lose our first love. We can't lose sight of who it is that we serve, who we follow, and what His Spirit in our hearts means, what His presence in our life means. And it clearly has something to do with how we conduct ourselves on the public stage.
So one of the things I say to folks, they say, well, okay. I mean, I spoke to a group recently of actually ministers, and they were like, well, is this that you're talking about? Is it ever worked anywhere? And my answer was, well, Jesus doesn't call us necessarily to always to win, to be the most effective. He calls us to be the most faithful. But that having been said, I'd say this is, how's the current approach working? This idea of everything's a knife fight and my goal is to own the other side. How's that working for us and actually solving problems? And it's not. And I think back to your earlier question, Joe, my experience has been the people who are the most effective in life, there are two things. They're humble. They realize the story's not about them. But second, they realize there is a bigger story going on. And focusing on our role in that bigger story and how we might have this world look a little bit more like the world that is to come, those are the people who are the most successful and effective.
Yeah, what a blessing. I think you're right, absolutely right. Governor, when people have been upset with a decision that you made, you made a decision, you felt it was the right one, but they've been upset with it. How do you deal with that? Can you think of an instance like that where you made a tough decision and people were mad?
Yeah, I can think of plenty. And I think too, I mean, sometimes, to be honest with you, it's interesting. I think part of being a person of faith is you make decisions because of that faith. Sometimes that make people on the right mad, and sometimes the very same week that'll make people on the left mad. But it's because our decisions aren't driven solely by our politics and where we are on the left-right spectrum. Okay, but there are plenty of, I mean, one of the things you learn really quick in this world is, think about it. If somebody wins an election 55-45 by 10 points, that's almost a landslide in today's world. We haven't had a presidential election like that in, 50 years. Okay, but that still means if it's 55-45, almost half of the people don't want you to be the president of the government, or they don't like your decision. And so you kind of have to get used to being in a world where everybody has an opinion about what you do, and about half of those opinions are folks who don't agree with you. So you just kind of have to get past that and learn to what's the right thing to do. Yeah. But having said all that, it's still, when you're bombarded with emails and phone calls to the office saying, you're the worst person we've ever elected in the history of forever. It isn't always the most fun.
Well, I'm sure it's got to be a challenge to love people who aren't loving you for the moment. Although it's such a thing of the moment. Right? Somebody who boos you today is your best friend tomorrow because of something else that you did.
Totally. Yeah, and my wife Chrissy has a saying. She says, "Politics is a wonderful chance to learn the practice of forgiveness," and it is that.
How has the challenge been for your family? So tell us about your family.
Yeah. So one of the things that made it a little easier on my family is by the time I ran for mayor, I had one child in college and two in high school, so they were older. And then by the time I ran for governor, they were all actually, I guess my youngest was still in college at that point, but they were older. Now they're all in their mid-30s, married. We have 10 grandkids, wow. Believe it or not.
That's great.
Which is the world's best job. Yeah. But it still is personal. One of the things you asked about, how do you react when people, say negative things, or there's a nasty commercial about you from the person you're running against that's on TV. And what you learn when you're in the middle of battle, like I know you played sports growing up. When you're in the battle, you're in the middle of the battle, okay? But the people around you who are watching, it's more personal to them, and so you learn to step back and kind of check on those folks around you to say, "Are you doing okay here?" Like, because it's their love for, in this case, it's my kids and Chrissy's love for me that had them feeling so. Anxious about this, and us getting beat up, whether it be by our opponent in election or by somebody who was just against something we were trying to do in office.
Yeah. Well, I know what you mean, Governor. I know what you mean. When we return, I'll ask the governor about what he views as the most essential character trait for a public servant, someone who is called to be in politics and government. I'll also ask him how we should handle our anger or disappointment at politicians. Don't go away.
You're watching Joe Watkins' State of Independence on Lighthouse TV. Positively different. Share your comments about today's program in the comment box at joewatkins.org.
He was the mayor of a major city in the volunteer state, Tennessee, then governor, and now he's reflected in a book called Faithful Presence, a deeply personal book about the role of Christians in politics. I hope you buy it today online. Governor Haslam, after serving all those years and observing politicians, many of whom believe they could be president one day, but didn't come close, what is the top trait or traits you look for in a leader? And how do you pick the people who get your vote for public office?
Yeah, so that's actually a really good question. So one of the top traits that I look for are people who actually solve problems. It is really, really easy in today's world to get a lot of attention whether it's on social media or, at a speech, whatever, by yelling the loudest, by being the most dramatic or having the most entertaining presentation. But that has nothing to do with solving problems. And we have real problems. So for me, even more than where somebody is on the political spectrum, is this somebody that's actually exhibited that? Can you point to places where they've solved problems in the past if you're going to elect them? And there's so many times we hear somebody saying something and they're talking about some problem. We're like, yes, that is a problem. That's how I feel too. Well, that's fine. That's part A. But what's part B? How are you going to solve that problem? And can you show me any way you've actually done that in the past? One of the things that I think marks leaders like that is there's a sense of humility. And we talked about that before. But there's a sense of the people who think the stories about them, at the end of the day, aren't about solving the problem. They're about having some glory reflected back on themselves. But really great leaders aren't that way at all. And I think the last thing I'd say in terms of who should you vote for is, would you actually want to work for that person? Would you want that person to be your boss? And if the answer is no, then don't hire that person to be the boss of the other 325 million of us.
Right. That's well said. Well said. You better than most people understand the rigors of being a leader and being in the public square. And you're also a person of faith who you're not ashamed to say that you follow Jesus, which is a wonderful thing. What do you think? I mean, people watching this show today will say to themselves, you know what? An election is upcoming in another, not too far in the future, and soon we'll start hearing from lots of people who want to run for president of the United States. Has God laid it on your heart what you should do, or is there, if you felt called to, would you lead in this way? Would you run for the presidency of the United States? So
I'll give you a real unequivocal answer. I don't know. There are two or three things. I know what's involved in running for president. I've had several friends and other people close to me do that, and it's one of those. It's not something you do in a half-hearted way, because it's the commitment needed to do it well is huge. Number two, if you do that, you have to really be convinced that you can bring something to that the country needs at this point in time. It shouldn't just be about can I win, or can I get enough attention that I can get a spot on a cable show at night come in the future. It should be about, the country faces real problems. Is there something I can do to actually help us address those in a better way? And then you have to decide, given those two things, understanding the cost, is there a way that I can help? Is that what God's calling me to do right now? And, I think those are things that anybody should be thinking and praying about in a really serious way, is, the answer to all three of those.
Yeah, well, you are thoughtful and smart and also a believer, which is wonderful. And you also know, already having served at this high level, the tremendous sacrifice that it calls for. So it'd be a huge sacrifice for you, certainly, and for your family. But certainly something for all of us to think about and all of us to pray for, because where we're headed matters to every one of us who calls himself or herself an American. So,
yeah, Joe, that's one point I want to make is I hope that Americans, in their frustration, exhaustion, that the answer is not just to retreat and to withdraw from the public square. That is not the right answer. Yeah. The answer is to engage. If you ask me, what you learn the most being in office, it's that who we elect matters even more than I thought it did.
Yeah.
And so I really want to encourage your listeners to not to disengage, but actually to engage and lean in and look for those people, like I said, who really understand the story's not about them. It is about solving these real problems that we face.
Yeah, beautifully said. Thank you so much, Governor. Well, even though politics is a tough business, God calls the people involved in political service to be different, filled with His Spirit. He asks us to be loving, life-giving, and always joyful, especially when we're being attacked or criticized. Our guest today certainly lived these values in public office, and I'm grateful that he took time to write this book. It was an honor to have him at State of Independence today. And again, thank you so much, Governor, for being with us.
No, it's fun to be with you, and it's good to catch up and have a chance, even if we're doing it across the screen, to be together. So thanks, Jim.
Thanks so much. I'll be right back with closing thoughts.
Learn more about Joe Watkins and the mission of this program at joewatkins.net. And tell Joe what you thought about today's program in the comment box.
Well, what a blessing to have the great governor of the state of Tennessee, the former governor of the state of Tennessee, Bill Haslam, as a guest today, and to really get a sense of what matters, especially when you're choosing a candidate, somebody to provide leadership for your county or for your city or for your state, and certainly for the country. All these things that he talked about are so important and so needed today, and it's important to be able to see beyond all the noise what really matters going forward for our country. He's somebody that you might see him on the national ticket. It's certainly something that I'll be praying for. I'll be praying for God to raise up a Bill Haslam or somebody just like him to want to carry that mantle to lead our country going forward in this once this next presidential election cycle takes place. If you're a citizen of the United States, and that's a special privilege, a privilege that carries great responsibilities as a citizen. But if you're a Christian, you're a citizen also of another kingdom, what the scriptures call the kingdom of heaven. If you carry that passport, we know what's expected. We're to love the Lord our God with all of our heart, soul, strength, and mind, and our neighbor, regardless of their politics, as ourselves. If you're having trouble doing that, ask God to give you love in your heart for them, for all of them. He's faithful and He'll do it. God is so good and is amazing, able to do all things, and He's certainly proven that in my life. He's done that in the life of Governor Bill Haslam. If you get a chance, write me a line in the comment box. I'd love to hear how this conversation with Governor Haslam impacted your thinking. I hope it did. The website where you can do that and watch also past episodes is joewatkins.org. From Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, America's first capital, I'm Joe Watkins. Thanks so much for watching. God willing, I'll see you next week.
Joe Watkins' State of Independence is a production of Lighthouse TV, positively different. Made possible in part because of the support of viewers like you.